It's November 18th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit to Peru. The South Korean leader wrapped up his state visit to Lima with a summit with his Peruvian counterpart that promised tighter cooperation in defense, minerals, and digital sectors. And next up, during his 8-day South American trip, is Brazil to attend the G20 Summit. U.S. President Joe Biden has reportedly authorized Ukraine to strike Russia with U.S. long-range weapons, while Russia on Sunday pounded Ukraine with missiles and drones that damaged Ukraine's power system ahead of the winter season. South Korea woke up to frosty weather on Monday morning, with the capital Seoul City dipping to 0 degrees Celsius and some parts of the country even issuing cold wave alert. President Yoon Suk-yeol held a summit with his Peruvian counterpart on Saturday, where the two agreed to enhance their comprehensive strategic partnership on various fronts. Our Oh Soo-young files this report from the Peruvian capital.
South Korea and Peru inked deals to ramp up cooperation in defense and critical future industries as Presidents Yoon Suk-yeol and Dina Boluarte held a bilateral summit in Lima. This came on Saturday during the South Korean leader's official visit to Peru, which hosted this year's summit of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. Following their talks, Yoon and Boluarte adopted a joint declaration on enhancing their strategic collaboration across various sectors, beginning with defense. The leaders welcomed a comprehensive deal on procuring ground equipment for the Peruvian army, a memorandum of understanding on joint naval vessel development, as well as an MOU to jointly produce components of Korea's indigenous fighter jet KF-21 with the Peruvian Air Force. According to Yoon's office, this signifies the deepening defense cooperation between Seoul and Lima, established in 2011. Their partnership is expected to pave the way for Korea's defense exports across the South American continent.
2012년 우리의 KT-1P 기본 훈련기 20대의 수출을 시작으로 양국은 긴밀한 방산 협력 관계를 이어왔고, 올해는 우리 기업이 페루 육군과 해군의 전략적 파트너로 선정되어 핵심 사업을 함께 추진해 나가기로 했습니다.
Peru is South Korea's only comprehensive strategic partner in Latin America. In terms of economic cooperation, the two countries will expand their partnership on infrastructure projects, minerals, and digital industries. The leaders committed to successfully completing the construction of the Chinchero International Airport, led by a Korean consortium, as a symbol of infrastructure cooperation, as they agreed to encourage the participation of South Korean firms in Peru's public projects, such as building new highways and subway lines. Also, with South Korea in need of critical minerals to support its high-tech industries, the two governments also signed an MOU on securing mineral supplies. Peru is the world's second-largest producer of copper, silver, and selenium. Seoul and Lima further agreed to work closely on new digital technologies like artificial intelligence, digital government, as well as the tourism sector. Furthermore, the two nations will strengthen strategic coordination on issues concerning the Korean Peninsula and the Indo-Pacific region based on their shared values of freedom, human rights, and the rule of law. Yoon and Boluarte jointly condemned North Korea's provocations and called for its complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization.
The leaders committed to creating regional prosperity together in the Asia-Pacific, especially as South Korea assumes chairship of the APEC Summit next year. Yoon's visit marks the first official visit to Peru by a South Korean president since 2015, and his first official visit to a Latin American country since his inauguration. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Lima.
President Yoon's also been busy meeting with world leaders on the sidelines of APEC in the hope of gaining support for pressuring North Korea against our recent deployment of troops to Russia. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
APEC was an opportunity for President Yoon Suk-yeol to meet with key leaders who play crucial roles in dealing with North Korea amid the regime's deployment of military support to Russia. President Yoon met with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba on Saturday local time on the sidelines for the second bilateral summit between them in around a month.
총리님과 첫 회담 이후 러북 간 군사 협력이 북한군 파병으로 이어지는 등 영내 및 세계 정세가 급박하게 돌아가고 있습니다.
Given the increasingly severe security environment surrounding us, including recent developments with North Korea, it is a critical task to continuously strengthen cooperation between Japan and South Korea.
The two leaders also discussed plans for next year, as it will be the 60th anniversary of normalizing diplomatic relations. Yoon and Ishiba also met U.S. President Joe Biden during the summit based on an agreement to hold trilateral talks on an annual basis made during the Camp David summit 15 months ago.
최근 북한군의 러시아 파병에서 볼 수 있듯이 엄중한 영내외 안보 환경은 한미일 삼국 협력의 중요성을 다시 한번 일깨워주고 있습니다. 바이든 대통령님 주도로 열린 지난해 캠프 데이비드 정상회의 이후 한미일 협력은 날로 견고해지고 있습니다.
The three nations also adopted a joint statement following the summit and announced the creation of the Trilateral Secretariat to institutionalize the overseeing of the trilateral cooperation following the Camp David summit.
This is likely to be my last trilateral meeting with this important group, and I'm proud to have helped take one of the parts of building this partnership. And I think it's built to last. That's my hope and expectation.
Earlier on Friday, President Yoon also met with Chinese President Xi Jinping, which was a reunion after a year, and held a sideline summit. President Yoon, seeking China's support in pressuring North Korea, called for close cooperation between the two nations.
특히 북한의 연이은 도발과 우크라이나 전쟁, 러북 군사 협력에 대응해 한중 양국이 영내 안정과 평화를 도모하는 데 협력해 나가기를 바랍니다.
As always, President Xi stayed reserved and re-emphasized his stance that although global circumstances are changing, the two nations should commit to the original spirit of their ties, not directly addressing issues with North Korea.
Regardless of how the situation evolves, South Korea and China should remain committed to the original spirit of the diplomatic ties, uphold the path of good neighbourly friendship, and adhere to the goal of mutual benefit and shared prosperity. By leveraging their geographical proximity, cultural affinities, and deeply integrated economies, both nations can maximise their strengths and foster closer cooperation.
The two leaders also discussed economic cooperation, such as renegotiating the FTA as next year becomes the 10th anniversary since its activation, and additional fields, such as the service sector, could be included. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
So President Yoon Suk-yeol rounded off his Peru state visit with a bundle of agreements and deals that will further scale up Seoul-Lima collaboration. Let's recap his Peru state visit with Professor Mason Ricci. Good morning, Professor Ricci.
Good morning.
So President Yoon's state visit to Peru marked the first visit by a South Korean leader to the country in 9 years, and it's also Yoon's first trip to South America since taking office. The question is, why and how is his visit to Peru so timely, and if so, in what way?
Yeah, so, the timely part of this, you can answer in two ways. What's going on in the world, and also, why Peru, why now, or why South America, why now? And, the short answer to that is APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, multilateral, and then the G20, which is going on in Brazil. So that's sort of the opportunity. And with these sorts of meetings, leaders that attend them always hold bilaterals on the side. And in the case of Yoon, of course, also the trilateral with the U.S. and Japan. South America is, not something or not a place that, we usually associate very much with South Korean foreign policy. But Peru, at least, is a comprehensive strategic partner for South Korea. In fact, the only one in South America. And attending APEC and attending the G20 and going to Peru and showing attention to Peru and to Brazil and to the other countries in South America, of course, reinforces the Yoon administration's emphasis on South Korea being a global pivotal state. So I think that's one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is, what's significant about this. The world obviously has a lot of challenges in front of it right now, whether that be uncertainty in the Russia-Ukraine war, war in the Middle East, the fallout from the U.S. election, and a lot of other issues. And so this is, of course, a place where you have a bunch of leaders of important countries gathered together, and Yoon is able to meet with them bilaterally in the case of Boluarte from Peru, obviously, or Xi Jinping from China, but also trilaterally with the United States and Japan, where they made an announcement about the establishment of the trilateral cooperation secretariat that they're going to set up. So, it's sort of typical multilateral diplomacy folded into bilateral relations as well.
Let's talk about what Yoon got out of his Peru state visit then. The leaders of Seoul and Lima, they agreed to further tighten economic ties, particularly in critical minerals. Why is their cooperation in this field so critical then?
Yeah, so minerals are an important input for a lot of the fourth industrial revolution economy. Batteries and robotics and all of these sorts of new technologies that are emerging and technologies that are connected with green growth and that sort of thing. And of course, Peru, like a number of South American countries, is an important producer of these, or at the very least has significant mining capacity in these areas, even if it's not yet totally online in some cases. And in Peru's case, for instance, it produces copper, selenium, silver, zinc, iron, a number of important raw minerals. And what, of course, has changed enormously in terms of the economics of minerals over the last 10 years or so is that a lot of the, for lack of a better term, Western world or liberal world, if you want to look at it this way, has put economic security very high on the list of priorities. And that means finding new supply chains, including for minerals, notably with the intent in some way of de-risking from over-reliance on China in this area, where China is a major player, of course. And that's really only going to get more important, it would seem, with the Trump administration coming in and looking to take a somewhat more modest de-risking policy that, for instance, the U.S. and Europe and South Korea and Japan and other countries were taking vis-a-vis China in these areas, and perhaps moving towards a more comprehensive decoupling. So finding alternate sources for these minerals to flow into sort of separated supply chains is an important priority for countries in the quote-unquote liberal or Western world.
Definitely. Then what about agreements on infrastructure? I mean, how is their pledge to work together to successfully complete the construction of the Chinchero Airport noteworthy?
Well, for the vast majority of the world, it's not noteworthy, to be bluntly honest with you. But, it's important for Peru because that airport is supposed to be the gateway to Machu Picchu, which is, the most important, or at least the most famous tourist site in Peru, UNESCO World Heritage Site, et cetera, et cetera. And for Korea, it matters, at least in some specialist circles, on trade and infrastructure, in the sense that the Korea Airport Corporation, along with Hyundai Heavy Construction, which was the contractor for this airport, are leading a consortium to build and manage this airport. And there were some problems with liquidity that led to some delays. That those liquidity issues were connected apparently to inflation and some other issues. And Apparently, there even resulted in some international litigation regarding who was going to pick up some of these extra costs. And with these types of large infrastructure projects, these types of delays are relatively common. But Korea, in part, bases its ability to get these types of projects over competitors from the U.S. or Europe or China or Japan or other places, because Korea has an image of largely being on time and on budget and reasonably priced for these types of projects. And so if it's delayed, that obviously scratches a little bit that image in that regard.
Maybe it's a much-needed deal more for Peru. Now, before I let you go, Professor Richie, Yoon Bollard slammed North Korea's nuclear and missile activities. Now, the question is, how can Peru play a role in keeping peace on the Korean Peninsula?
It can't, really, to be bluntly honest with you. Keeping peace on the Korean Peninsula is largely the job of South Korea and the United States through their alliance. What, of course, is important is that Peru can help or be just one more country providing a united diplomatic front in multilateral organizations, whether that be APEC or the United Nations, that calls out bad North Korean behavior, malign North Korean behavior, whether that be illegal arms and transfers or illegal financial activity, cyber security violations, all of the things that North Korea does in order to, finance its weapons programs and finance its regime. Obviously, it's another diplomatic, another country with a diplomatic profile that can call out North Korea for its human rights violations. So diplomatically, Peru can help play a role as a strategic partner of South Korea, in being one more brick in this international wall that pushes back against North Korea's malign behavior. One would also point out that, in a place like South America, where perhaps North Korea has, ongoing illicit activities underneath the radar, to the extent that Peru, might have some intelligence insight into those types of activities through its relationship with other states there. It can also be a conduit for information flowing back to Seoul or to Washington or the United Nations for some of the things that North Korea is doing under the radar, economically or otherwise, in order to keep its regime afloat in violation of international sanctions.
Indeed. All right. Professor Richie, thanks so much for sharing your insight with us this morning. You have a wonderful day.
Great. Thanks. You too.
The South Korean military said Monday that North Korea is sending what is presumed to be the trash-carrying balloons toward the south. According to the Joint Chief of Staff, considering the wind direction, there is a possibility that the balloons will move toward Gyeonggi-do province and the Seoul metropolitan area. Now, North Korea has launched trash balloons toward the south 31 times since May, but it had been around weeks since it last did so. The launch also comes as a North Korean leader's sister Kim Yo-jong on Sunday vowed Seoul will pay a dear price for sending propaganda leaflets across the border. U.S. President Joe Biden has reportedly given Ukraine permission to use long-range U.S. missiles in Russia, a move seen as a message to North Korea, which has sent troops to Russia. Our An Sung-jin tells us more.
U.S. officials revealed Sunday that President Joe Biden has for the first time authorized the use of U.S. long-range weapons for Ukraine to use to strike deep inside Russia. According to the New York Times, the U.S. supplied Army Tactical Missile Systems, or ATACMS, could be used against Russian and North Korean troops deployed against Ukraine forces in Russia's Kursk region. ATACMS, which have a range of 300 kilometers, are not expected to change the course of the war, but instead send a clear message to North Korea that it should no longer send its troops to Russia. While there was no public comment from the White House, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky seemed to acknowledge the reports.
Today, there's a lot of talk in the media about us receiving permission for respective actions, but strikes are not carried out with words. Such things are not announced. Missiles will speak for themselves. They certainly will. Glory to Ukraine.
Ukraine had repeatedly asked for the use of U.S. long-range weapons to target military facilities in Russia. However, the U.S. had banned Ukraine from using such weapons against mainland Russia over fears that it may escalate the conflict further. The move comes just 2 months before Donald Trump is sworn in as the next U.S. president. Trump has been critical of the provision of additional support for Ukraine, and according to the New York Times, the new administration may try to end the war under the condition that Russia keeps Ukrainian territory, which it has already taken over. The same source says Ukraine is willing to exchange Russian territory it holds in Kursk for Ukrainian regions captured by Moscow. Earlier on Sunday, Russia launched one of the largest missile and drone attacks on Ukraine since August, attacking energy facilities, including the power grid in Kyiv and several other cities. Around 120 missiles and 90 drones were launched, and at least 5 people were killed in the assault. Ukrenergo, Ukraine's principal energy supplier, said blackouts may occur in all regions as engineers try to repair as much of the damage from the strikes. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Israel over the weekend conducted large-scale airstrikes against Lebanon, killing dozens. Israel also killed Hezbollah's chief spokesperson on Sunday during an airstrike targeting central Beirut. Lee Seung-jae has more.
The Israeli military continues its military operations against Lebanon with massive airstrikes on Saturday against some 200 different targets. Despite dozens of civilians being killed, Israel says it targeted Hezbollah infrastructure, including a weapons depot and a command center. It also released videos and photos of what it said were hidden Hezbollah weapons storage facilities in civilian areas. The Israeli military added that Hezbollah fired around 65 missiles towards Israel. The clashes between the two sides took place as the U.S. ambassador to Lebanon drafted a proposal to halt the Israel-Hezbollah clash. The 13-point proposal includes a 60-day ceasefire. However, Israel has not responded to the offer. Meanwhile, an Israeli airstrike in central Beirut killed Hezbollah's chief spokesperson on Sunday. According to a Hezbollah official, Mohammed Afif, who headed media relations for the militant group, was killed during an airstrike on the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party's office. More than 3,400 people have been killed in Lebanon since Israel began its military operations outside of Gaza. However, it's not known how many of the dead are Hezbollah militants. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a look at the stories from around the world with our Kim Xiang. Good morning, Xiang.
Good morning, Dami.
Let's begin today with the G20 Summit set to begin in Brazil. Now, what can we expect from this year's edition?
That's right, Dami. This year's Group of 20 Summit, comprised of 19 member countries and 2 regional bodies, the African Union and the European Union, will begin later on Monday in Rio de Janeiro. Now, the heads of state of the world's largest economies are in Rio for a 2-day summit starting today, where dialogue on global issues such as climate change, digital economy and growing geopolitical tensions is expected. Now, G20 member states account for some 85% of the global economy, and the Leaders' Conference in Rio will attempt to determine the direction of policies to shape the world economy through cooperation. Ahead of the summit, the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on Sunday called on the G20 leaders to leverage their influence to tackle key issues such as the climate, while emphasizing the importance of peace in Gaza, Lebanon, Ukraine and Sudan. Guterres also said that the G20 accounts for 80% of global emissions, adding that it's time for the group to show leadership by setting an example. Now, continuing in Brazil, U.S. President Joe Biden became the first sitting U.S. president to visit the Amazon forest. During his 4-hour visit on Sunday, Biden met with indigenous leaders before signing a U.S. proclamation designating November 17th as International Conservation Day. He also toured the Amazon rainforest around the city of Manaus aboard his Marine One presidential helicopter to view the region, which is suffering the worst drought in decades. Now, Biden pledged an additional $50 million to the Amazon Fund, bringing the total U.S. contribution to $100 million. His tour comes ahead of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, where climate change is one of the priority issues. In China's Jiangsu province, a stabbing rampage at a vocational college on Saturday has left 8 people dead and 17 others injured. A 21-year-old suspect was arrested at the scene. Now, police say he confessed to the crime without hesitation. Authorities say the former student at the Wuxi Vocational College of Arts and Technology in Yixing, where the incident took place, carried out the attack out of anger from failing to obtain his diploma due to poor exam results. Now, the attack comes less than a week after a driver in Zhuhai City killed 35 people and severely injured another 43 with his car at a crowded sports center.
Saturday's rain brought a major change in the weather to early winter, and I'm sure you have seen piles of dried fallen leaves covering the sidewalks this morning. Well, bitterly cold conditions to start off the new week with cold wave alerts issued for some places, and parts of Jeollabuk-do province are under cold wave warning. And a strong wind advisory is also in place for Jeju and the west coast regions. And afternoon highs will also be 2 to 8 degrees lower today, so we'll need to keep our jackets on all day with hot drinks. It should feel much colder after days of unseasonably warm weather we had, and plus strong winds. Taking a closer look, Seoul gets up to just 7 degrees. Daegu and Gwangju will make it to 9 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Sunny skies shine down all day nationwide. Now, thankfully, the winter chill will be short-lived and temperatures will gradually rise to seasonal norms. Meanwhile, rain is in the forecast for Jeju tomorrow. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for our morning edition of Arirang News. Have a wonderful start to the week.